Mexico to Arkansas, as well as eventually up into possibly as far north as Iowa, and then also encompassing parts of the plains. So Kansas, Nebraska, Oklahoma likely in it as well.
I want to ask you how human-caused climate change is affecting us.
Yeah, so we know that climate change is causing this to be much worse than it otherwise would be. There's been some quick analyses done that show that the temperatures are at least five times more likely to be at this level than they would have been in a world without all this added greenhouse gas emissions.
Andrew Friedman covers weather, climate, and energy for Axios. Thanks, Andrew.
Thanks for having me.
One last thing before we go. Today marks 8 years since the Supreme Court legalized same-sex marriage in the U.S., ending a ban in 14 states. And according to the U.S. Census Bureau, the number of same-sex households has gone up 30% since the ruling. The most recent census data estimates there are 1.2 million same-sex couple households, of which 59% are married. That's it for us today. I'm Nyla Boodoo. Thanks for listening. Stay safe, and we'll see you back here tomorrow morning. MSNBC's Rachel Maddow is back with another chart-topping podcast series. Rachel Maddow presents Deja News. Rachel and co-host Isaac Davey Aronson examine the ways history repeats itself in today's headlines. Search for Deja News and listen now.
They call it running a business for a reason, because every day feels like a sprint to the finish. But with Clover and Merchant One, you're always one step ahead. Accept payments, run your business, and sell more. Clover plus Merchant One, better business solutions. Go to clover.com/M1 to get started.
Here's your money briefing for Monday, June 26th. I'm J.R. Whalen for the Wall Street Journal. Returning to the office has meant a return to working with a patchwork of personalities, including the office jerk. Sure, the disruptions can be annoying, but they can also impact their coworkers' careers.
When we encounter jerks, it's death by 1,000 paper cuts. Eventually, we disengage from the workplace. We have revolving doors of talent. The accumulation of the stress in your body as well is also something we shouldn't underestimate. When you're experiencing these chronic stressors from jerks, eventually you're going to see consequences like poor sleep.
We'll talk to New York University psychology professor Tessa West about a recent study that highlighted the anxiety some people feel when giving feedback. After the break.
They call it running a business for a reason, because every day feels like a sprint to the finish. It takes a lot of work to make it all work. But with Clover and Merchant One, you're always one step ahead. Now is the perfect time to upgrade your point-of-sale technology. We make it easy to accept payments, run your entire business, and sell more. Clover plus Merchant One, better business solutions. Go to clover.com/M1 to get started.
Are you the office jerk? You might think, of course not. But what if your coworkers disagree? Turns out they may be reluctant to tell you how they really feel. Tessa West is a professor of psychology at New York University. She and her colleagues conducted a study to find out why people find it difficult to give negative feedback, and she joins me now. So Tessa, what kind of jerk-like behavior are we talking about?
When most of us hear the word jerk, we think really egregious stuff, yelling at someone, insulting them, taking away their power in a meeting. But I actually really focus on the low-level types of jerk behavior. Interruptions, kind of ignoring people, writing a slightly rude email, or taking over a meeting, the kinds of things that we encounter in our everyday work lives.
So why did you decide to do the study?
I think it's fascinating to look at how people avoid feedback in uncomfortable situations. As a social psychologist, that's really what I focus on, is how people avoid feeling anxious and uncomfortable, even if it kind of hurts them in the end. So one of the studies we talk about in this piece is really focusing on giving feedback to someone who obviously needs it, in the context of losing a negotiation to that person, in all the ways that which people will just avoid saying the thing, instead of just being straightforward and honest in a way that's useful to the person on the receiving end.
Why do they try to avoid giving feedback?
I think we live in a culture where negative feedback is just seen as really inappropriate, and probably more importantly, we don't learn how to do it in a constructive way. So we're very afraid of it. We're afraid it's going to backfire, that the person's going to do things like engage in reverse blame. Well, maybe if you had done this better, I wouldn't be in this situation. And I think that's typically how these things play out. And so instead of learning the strategies to be better at it, we just avoid it completely.
So how did you work this feedback issue into the study that you and your colleagues did?
So what we did in that study was we were interested in what happens when you're in a situation where clearly you need to give someone constructive feedback. This person has just done a negotiation with you. We've come in as scientists and said, hey, this person lost to you. Why don't you give them some constructive feedback on what they could do? So kind of the ideal situation where feedback makes sense, setting them up for success in that situation, telling them even ways in which they could do this. And most people just stuck with the positives. What was fascinating though is at the same time we measured their physiology, so we could see that their heart rate was kind of going through the roof, that they were very stressed out while delivering this positive feedback. So we call this the brittle smiles effect. Smiling, nodding your head, telling them you did great, all the while you look like you're on the treadmill at the same time because you're avoiding the negative stuff.
Oh, so grinning right through your teeth.
That's right.
So when the exercise was over, how did the people respond to this newfound ability to give feedback?
People can really lean into it if you give them very specific instructions. And what's great about it is people feel much more confident if you tell them to avoid saying negative stuff completely and focus on the behaviors someone's doing, make them small and bite-sized and immediate, and really avoid making attributions for people's behavior completely. Don't use the word jerk. Don't say mean, or don't say you intended to do this, that, and the other. If you stick to the small stuff, to the behaviors that people are doing, then they feel suddenly much more confident in being able to deliver that kind of feedback. So that's usually how we train people on kind of how to get around this very sticky social situation.
All right, so back to the office environment. What's the best way to approach someone who might need to be told to, tone it down?
The best thing to do is to approach them and ask them if you can talk about the event that led you to feel like they were a jerk. Maybe in a meeting they cut you off 15 times and interrupted you, or maybe your boss micromanaged you and oversaw your work a little too much. Instead of going to them and telling them how you feel, go to them and say, can we talk about that event? I feel like maybe we're not on the same page regarding some of those behaviors. And then at the end of the conversation, where you deliver information and you ask them about how did they feel about this behavior, here's what I thought that meant, ask for feedback yourself. As soon as it feels reciprocal, as soon as the person you're giving feedback to feels like they can also give some feedback to you, they feel much better about it. They're less likely to feel attacked, they're much less defensive about the feedback experience.
Some people might be sort of laughing about the scenario of someone acting like a jerk, but there could be some very real ramifications here. This can affect people's careers. It can affect their earnings.
Absolutely, and I think most of us, when we encounter jerks, it's death by 1,000 paper cuts. Eventually, we disengage from the workplace. We have revolving doors of talent, so people in management really need to care about kind of seeing these things when they're first starting, detecting them early so that they don't get out of hand. And they absolutely add up over time, and I think the accumulation of the stress in your body as well is also something we shouldn't underestimate. As someone who studies stress for a living, I know that when you're experiencing these chronic stressors from jerks, eventually you're going to see consequences like poor sleep, poor eating, and even heart disease and cardiovascular issues, things like that.
So let's say somebody has figured out that indeed they are the office jerk, or maybe an office jerk. How can they use the right kind of feedback to help them rectify their ways?
If you think you're a jerk, first off, you're in good company. Most of us have the potential to be an office jerk. What you want to do is actually sidestep the kind of jerk questions completely. Ask about your specific behaviors. If the person who you're worried you're a jerk to is someone who's underneath you in some capacity, you hold power over them, don't even ask about your behaviors. Ask about what an ideal behavior would look like for that person. So you're really getting around kind of jerk language, jerk accusations, and say, what would the ideal amount of time to turn around this document be? Or do you want me to call on you, or do you feel comfortable speaking up? Sometimes you can detect that you're a jerk by just looking at the discrepancy between what you're doing and what the people around you say they would love to see in a person in your position. So I'm a big fan of kind of the more indirect path of detecting that you're the actual jerk in work.
So you had very specific takeaways that you wanted to come from this study.
What I do is learn where the Achilles heel is in people's ability to give feedback and the ability to ask for it. So there's kind of both this combination of if you don't ask ask the right way, no one will tell you that you're a jerk. If you deliver it poorly, people are going to get extremely defensive. And so just very kind of specific behavior-based immediate types of feedback are the best. I don't like feedback that happens once a quarter or once a month because it feels too big and scary. I like the kind of more organic, natural, bite-sized pieces of feedback. And I think what I learned from the studies, when you formalize feedback, people get really uncomfortable. Even if it's to say, this is a 15-minute feedback conversation, that's sufficient enough to disrupt the whole process. It's better if you just kind of do it when you're walking down the hall and it feels more natural. It feels less kind of structured.
That's New York University psychology professor Tessa West. And that's your Money Briefing. I'm J.R. Raymond, the Wall Street Journal.
When did life start getting so complicated? Buying a home? Complicated. Home finances? Certainly not a walk in the park. And raising kids? Yeah, it's a lot. And then there's insurance. What if my policy doesn't cover this? Or what if I have to make a claim in the middle of the night? Good news. State Farm is there for your what-ifs. You can reach them 24/7, file a claim on the State Farm mobile app, or simply call your agent to ask anything. So even if life gets tricky, insurance doesn't have to be. Like a good neighbor, State Farm is there. Call or go to statefarm.com for a quote today.
And fundraisers for people who are Black or Hispanic, they're even less successful. Ken Worthy and her colleagues looked at 827 medical campaigns on GoFundMe that had raised over $100,000 in 2020. Only 5 were for Black women. Black patients also use the platform less, maybe because there's much less wealth in Black communities.
Your friends tend to be the same race as you, and so when you turn to those friends through crowdfunding for assistance, you are essentially tapping into their wealth and their income.
The median white family has about $184,000 in assets, such as homes, savings, and retirement accounts. For the median Black family, it's just $23,000. There may be another reason why Black Americans use crowdfunding less: sensitivity about stereotyping. When Christy Fields' nurse suggested that she and her husband go to the public for help,
and we just looked at each other like, wait, what? No, we're not doing that.
Fields is the daughter of a single mom who worked fast food jobs while going to school. She gave Fields a strict lesson. Getting help from family and friends is one thing. Asking strangers is something else.
In the Black community, a lot of the older generation do not take handouts because you're feeding into the stereotype that's already perceived.
Political scientist Martin Gillen says the sensitivity is understandable. He's the author of Why Americans Hate Welfare.
There's sort of a centuries-long suspicion of the poor, a cynicism about the degree of true need.
He says that's been reinforced by the inaccurate view that poverty is a Black problem. Fields, who's African American, says instead of making people advertise their suffering, there's a better way to help. When she recovered from cancer, she and her family delivered groceries and dropped off gas cards for other cancer patients. Now she's opening what she calls a cancer care boutique, offering wigs and prosthetics and skin lotions at discounted prices.
When someone is in need, they don't want to be plastered all over your TV, all over Facebook, Instagram. They want to feel loved.
While helping others, Fields hopes someday she'll pay off her own medical debt. She still owes several $1,000s.
That's Noam Levy with our partner KFF Health News.
Support for NPR health coverage comes from Procter & Gamble, maker of ZzzQuil Pure Z's gummies, designed with melatonin for occasional sleeplessness to help people fall asleep naturally. Learn more at ZzzQuil.com.
They say records are made to be broken. Well, over the weekend, baseball's Los Angeles Angels did just that. Bill Shaken is a baseball writer for the Los Angeles Times.
What happened Saturday night in Denver was that the Angels, who have been a Major League Baseball team since 1961, scored more runs than they have in any game in their entire existence. 25 runs.
25 runs? That is crazy. Against the Colorado Rockies. By chance, Layla, I was at the game the night before in Denver. The Rockies won, and then the Angels came back in the next game. Started early in the game, 13 runs in the third inning, and then added 8 more in the fourth.
The combination of 21 runs in back-to-back innings, it was the first time any major league team had put up so many runs since 1894. So what we're saying is, in the entirety of the 20th century, nobody did that.
Well, let's not make this all about the Angels. Colorado set a record too. Not a record they want, probably. It was the worst defeat in the history of the Rockies franchise. That said, a win is a win is a win.
The Angels do not get to hoard any runs and carry them over to the next day to make it a little more palatable. Whether you win 2-1 or 25-1, you get one win.
And that's the beauty of the long regular season in baseball. On Sunday, the teams played again, and the Rockies answered back, beating the Angels by a single run, 4-3.
This afternoon, on All Things Considered, Florida has become a hotbed for political news stories with a national scope. From the presidential recount in 2000 to the recent federal indictment against former President Donald Trump, Sunshine State is often affecting national politics. So how did Florida become so important? Listen by asking your smart speaker to play NPR or your local member station by name. Since diagnosis, trying to change that.
I wake up every day and I realize that I want to live.
I'm Lana Summers, turning pain into purpose on All Things Considered from NPR News.
You can hear All Things Considered this afternoon at 4 o'clock until 6:30. Today with Tana Weingartner on 91.7 WVXU. It's 67 degrees right now. You might see some spotty afternoon showers today.
Support comes from the University of Cincinnati College of Medicine and UC Physicians, where the UC Emergency Medicine team is standing at the ready. From minor injuries and the most complex trauma to recognized research and breakthrough treatments, their mission is to be ready for you when you need them most. Learn more at med.uc.edu/indispensable.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Dave Mattingly. Russian President Vladimir Putin has made no public comments since Saturday about last week's short-lived uprising by Wagner Group mercenaries against Russia's military. NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg says he thinks it reflects political weakness in Moscow 16 months into Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Andrei Soldatov is a Russian investigative journalist.
So I'm going to a hiring event for the company, and hopefully we can attract some people to come work for us, drive some buses. There's a few other positions, but our high priority, I think, is drivers. Because we're competing with, I guess, higher paying jobs out there. You know, you can get your CDL and drive a dump truck for, I don't know, six or $12 more than what we're paying. Really, I guess our selling point is, you know, a fixed schedule, government pension, cheap medical plan. But I don't think a lot of people are in this line of work are thinking long term. They're looking maximum dollar in a short period of time. So it's tough. This person's texting and driving. Perfect. So I think this is like a trade school and a high school combined. The Russell D. Lee Butler Tech campus. They tell me to turn right, but I think it's left.
commercial real estate, a look at how office building owners might respond to unending vacancies. That's coming up on Marketplace in 10 minutes at 6:30 here on WVXU.
Support comes from Journey Advisory Group. Journey knows that enjoying your child's birthday party matters most today, but so does college financial planning for the very near future. By knowing what's important to clients, Journey offers personalized wealth management, estate, retirement, and college planning. To learn how they can help with what matters most, visit journeyadvisory.group.
Support comes from the Longworth Anderson series, presenting Corinne Bailey Ray, the Black Rainbows Tour at Memorial Hall on September 12th. Tickets at memorialhallotr.com. Coming up this week on Cultivating Place, we prepare for that seasonal zenith known as the summer solstice. We're back in conversation with Day Shilkret, the human behind Mourning Altars, impermanent earth art bringing together nature, art, and ritual. Sounds like gardening to me. Join.
It's Elvis Duran. It's Valentine in the morning.
All the once-in-a-lifetime events.
All the best free curated playlists. I need variety.
All the great podcasts for every interest.
Country Hill fans, you watch podcasts?
Patriotic lawn chairs with carrying bank. Only $12.99 after rebate.
This is mid-60s. Still a little bit crazy, not dilutions. And from Plymouth Gin Distillery. Plymouth Gin is imported from England's southwest coast, distilled using a blend of 7 botanicals, including juniper berry, coriander seed, and citrus peel. Plymouth Gin since 1793.
This is All Things Considered from NPR News. I'm Ari Shapiro. The Prime Minister of Greece has been sworn in for a second term after a landslide victory in Sunday's election. His conservative New Democracy Party secured more than 40% of the vote. That wasn't too much of a surprise. But as Lydia Imanolidou reports from Athens, the entry of several far-right parties into the Greek parliament was unexpected.
As New Democracy's historic lead was becoming clear last night, Greek Prime Minister Kyriakos Mitsotakis took the stage in front of flag-waving supporters as fireworks shot into the sky behind him. The Harvard and Stanford-educated politician thanked his backers for giving him another 4 years in office, and New Democracy 158 of the 300 seats in the Greek parliament, an outright ruling majority.
So after 4 tough years of COVID, energy crisis, cost of living crisis, and various other issues, that's a really strong, big victory for Mitsotakis.
Mankoutsis is with the political and economic analysis website Metropolis, and the various other issues were a spying scandal that embroiled Mitsotakis' government. There were massive protests and calls for him to resign after Greece's deadliest train crash in late February, and more recently a migrant shipwreck where hundreds are believed to have lost their lives. Greek voters, though, were focused on pocketbook issues. The economy has improved under Mitsotakis, and he promises more growth in the next 4 years. Mankoutsis, the analyst, says Greeks opted for continuity and stability.
The other big story of the night is that it was a disastrous night for the main opposition party, left-wing Syriza.
This is the leftist party headed by the former Greek Prime Minister Alexis Tsipras. Mankoutsis and other analysts say their crushing defeat could spell the end for Tsipras and his party. Some have described it as the collapse of the Greek left. The most unexpected outcome of the election, though, are the 3 far-right ultra-nationalist parties voted into parliament. Akritas Kaidadzis teaches constitutional law at the Aristotle University of Thessaloniki. He says it's clear that, like other countries in the region, Greece is moving to the right.
The electorate has given its confidence to the far right, and this is something very worrying, even shocking. This is a dark time for Greece.
Far-right newcomers to the Greek parliament include the Spartans Party. This is widely seen as an offshoot of the Golden Dawn, a neo-Nazi party that was deemed a criminal organization in 2020. The Spartans were largely unknown until one of Golden Dawn's convicted leaders from his jail cell endorsed them, which was the fuel that got the party into the Greek parliament. For NPR News, I'm Lydia Imanolidou in Athens.
We've heard a lot about fears that artificial intelligence will eliminate human jobs. Well, we're going to look now at a massive workforce of humans whose jobs were created for AI.
They are the foot soldiers training the algorithms. Their job title is sometimes called being an annotator or a tasker. Feature writer Josh Jezza talked with dozens of them for his new piece in partnership with New York Magazine and The Verge. Welcome to All Things Considered.
Thanks for having me.
You tried doing some of this work yourself, so tell us what it involves.
It's quite difficult, and it's very strange. So some of the things that I did, I was labeling clothing in social media photos, labeling traffic cones for self-driving cars, and chatting with some chatbots. And that's a fairly representative range of the jobs that are out there right now. But there's lots of other stuff too. There's sort of social media content moderation type things, lots of e-commerce, listening to customer service chatbots, things like that.
Now, in the case of identifying traffic cones for self-driving cars, you more or less know the context of what you're doing, what the larger goal is. But a lot of the people you spoke to did not really understand what they were working on, what big companies' technology they were helping develop, and nobody you spoke with was willing to use their real name. So why is there so much secrecy surrounding this?
Yes, it's an extremely opaque industry. Being an annotator gives you kind of a ground level view into what these companies are working on and some of their methods about how they train their AI. And so they don't want that public, but you need a huge number of people to do this work. And so it's quite difficult to police leaks. So workers are told not to talk about their jobs, even with their fellow coworkers. We have companies that have code names for each project. You could be working on something and you have no idea who the customer is or what you're even really training an AI to do.
What's the best estimate of how many people are doing this kind of work around the world right now?
It's extremely hard to find one. Millions was a number that I heard a lot and people said was safe.
Will you tell us about one of the annotators you spoke to? Who's a guy named Victor?
Yeah, so Victor, when he first started annotating, he was a student in Nairobi, Kenya. He was very excited about AI. He sees it as a transformative technology. And the work he was doing at first, it was annotating imagery and LiDAR data for self-driving cars. But as he kept working on the platform, the pay dropped, became more precarious. There would be periods where he would have tons of well-paying work and then nothing for weeks. And so he developed this routine of waking up every couple hours in the middle of the night when he felt the best paying tasks would drop. I spoke to him about a project he was working on. He was labeling elbows and knees in photographs. He doesn't know why. He stayed up 36 hours straight to work as much as he could on that task. When we last spoke, he was working on chatbots and was making about $3 an hour. And he was quite frustrated. He wanted to break into the industry, but felt very isolated. Didn't know who he was working for.
You spoke with so many people doing this kind of work. Did any of them feel like they were well treated? Like this is a good job with good pay, and they're treated fairly?
I did talk to people who enjoyed the work, but lately a lot of the work has been going to the U.S., especially with chatbots and language models. You need people who are fluent in English, who have certain specialties, and these jobs can pay fairly well. I spoke to people who are reading chatbot responses for $30 an hour or more.
Do you think we're far off from a future where AI will no longer require a massive human labor force, or is that even something we should be aiming for?
I left reporting this story thinking that we're very far off from that future, and that, just the number of tasks that I saw that were requiring human labor for AI systems that I had thought were automated, just a huge number of things for social media algorithms, for e-commerce search systems, things like that, still requiring work because these systems they're very brittle. They don't do well when there's something that isn't represented in their training data. And so as the world changes, their training data needs to change, and you need humans for that. Paradoxically, a lot of people I spoke with expect this sort of work to increase as AI improves.
That's Josh Jezza. His report in New York Magazine looks at the work of humans training AI. Thanks for your time.
Thank you.
Support for All Tech Considered comes from CrowdStrike, whose cybersecurity platform is designed to protect organizations by monitoring trillions of cyber events to detect threats and prevent breaches before they happen. CrowdStrike, protection that powers you. And from Data IQ, a platform for everyday AI to help organizations make AI part of their daily business. Designed to elevate people, teams, and companies. DATAIKU.com.
This is NPR News.
Support comes from Council on Aging, your connection to the wide variety of programs, services, and resources available to older adults and caregivers in the community with a focus on independent living. Learn more at 513-721-1025 or helpforseniors.org. That's help, the numeral 4, seniors.org.
Looking at traffic, you're hitting the brakes 71 south between Montgomery and 471. There's also a wreck Calhoun near Clifton, one Harrison at Woodrow, and another West 8th at Seton. Marketplace is coming up next here on WVXU, 84 degrees now in Cincinnati.
Public access to factual, non-biased, and independent journalism is crucial, and we're proud to be your source for news. More than 82% of WVXU's funding comes directly from listeners and local businesses and foundations. Thank you for listening every day. Please support it at WVXU.org. Marketplace is supported by Extend, turning credit cards into spend management tools so businesses can control payments with virtual cards. More at paywithextend.com.
It seems quiet, economically, sure, but still waters run deep, you know. From American Public Media, this is Marketplace.
Marketplace is supported by Dana-Farber Cancer Institute, where researchers seek new breakthroughs inspired by the work of previous Dana-Farber scientists. danafarber.org/stories.
In Los Angeles, I'm Kai Risdell. It is Monday, today, the 26th of June. Good as always to have you along, everybody. If you were with us on Friday, you heard me say it kind of felt like we had entered the summertime economic news doldrums. A couple of pops of activity, but otherwise kind of quiet. We begin this week the same way, but it is going to heat up in just a couple of days. We'll get consumer confidence figures, revised gross domestic product, that's economic growth. Also personal consumption expenditures, the Fed's preferred measure of inflation. Tomorrow, we're going to get something called durable goods orders for the month of May. Tools and machinery, robotic arms, other big manufactured stuff. Marketplace's Justin Ho explains what that can tell us.
Manufacturers' workloads depend a lot on the state of the economy. And right now, the global economy is slowing down, says Chad Moutre, chief economist at the National Association of Manufacturers.
As a result of some of that global weakness, we're seeing demand for manufactured goods in the U.S. pretty challenged.
Moutre says in many cases, manufacturers themselves have been buying less new equipment and machinery, in some cases because of that slower demand. And ever since the regional bank failures that happened this year, Moutre says manufacturers are having a harder time financing big purchases.
It's likely more of an issue for those small and medium-sized manufacturers that are much more heavily dependent on those regional banks for their credit.
A lot of this depends on what type of durable goods we're talking about. Orders of computers, for example, have been rising lately. Kathy Voss-Janssen, chief economist at Nationwide, says given how hard it's been to find workers,
there's even more demands to be productive, and technology is at the core of it.
Then there are the durable goods used in parts of the economy where consumer spending is strong, like food service. Greg Warwick, CEO of TMB Baking, which sells stuff like spiral mixers and rotating rack ovens to artisan bakeries and wholesalers.
We're seeing strength within both of those to support the high demand for baked goods.
Warwick says it helps that consumers have been spending more on services, like going out to eat. So many of his clients are doing well. But even if the economy slows down,
it doesn't hurt that we're supporting a segment of the industry where consumers need to purchase those core items.
It's because baked goods are a staple. I'm Justin Howe for Marketplace.
3 words, people. 3 little words. Commercial real estate. Building owners and banks and leasing agents and just about everybody involved in CRE, as it's known, offices in this case to be specific, is asking themselves some version of the same question.